come around again to Ash Wednesday and Lent. And it's just struck me this year how full of apparent contradictions this day and this season are. We had a little meeting with the folks who give ashes out in the bell tower last Sunday, and it was lovely. We sort of shared our experiences, and somebody said, when are you supposed to wash the ashes off? Are you supposed to get them and then just wash them off? Because it says right in the gospel that we read every single Ash Wednesday, don't show everybody that you're praying. Don't walk around kind of announcing that you're doing holy things. And that's exactly what we do on Ash Wednesday, right? It's the day of the year when our faith becomes the very most visible in the world. We walk around with these big, dark ash crosses on our foreheads, right? Contradiction. I didn't answer the question, by the way. I said that's a personal decision that we all make a little differently. And then there's the season of Lent itself. The word Lent comes from the Anglo-Saxon word for the lengthening of days in the springtime in the northern hemisphere. So just when the earth starts to kind of come out of its winter slumber and burst forth in beauty, the Christian world goes in on itself, almost like we collectively were the groundhog that saw its shadow and declared 6 more weeks of winter, right? We go inward again to a somberness, no flowers on the altar, very simple, stark, bare colors, simple music, inward reflection. It's like we're going back again into that winter work that happens under the ground and deep in the vines themselves before the buds break forth at Easter. Sort of a contradiction between what's happening in the natural world and what's happening in our church calendar this time of year. And then there's the fact that we begin a period of time which is specifically to prepare for the celebration of the triumph of life at Easter by remembering our deaths, by hearing the words, remember that you are dust and to dust you shall return, right? Apparent contradiction, I'm going to say. And last but not least, it's not a contradiction of the season, but I think a lot of people find it to be a contradiction that keeps them away from religion altogether, that we believe in a God of life, a God who is love, and death also exists, and destruction and disease and atrocities of every kind, right? These two things together, an apparent contradiction that some people just can't hold, right? How can there be a God of life and love and all of this, right? How can all of this, both of these things be true? I got to thinking about contradiction and paradox. Contradiction, if you look at the root of the word, would mean to say against, right? Contradiction, to say against. Two things coming against each other that can't actually both be true in the same level, in the same plane, in the same way. I can say the door is open, you can say the door is closed, and one of us is wrong, right? One of those things has to be amended, one of those statements. But paradox, look at the roots of that word, para and dox. Truth is dox, and para is maybe alongside or together, right? So two truths alongside each other, right? That seem to be in tension with one another, seem to be in contradiction with one another. And I think that's actually maybe the point. That may actually be the crux of this season. To hold these things, these apparent tensions, these apparent contradictions, these opposites, right, in one hand and the other, and to sit in the space in between them until a third truth emerges. And that's the thing about paradox, right? I can't say, okay, here's the third truth. I've got it for you. You don't have to go do the work yourself, right? Because that's not how it works. All of us have to sit in that tension, sit in that contradiction until that third thing emerges. I'm leading a retreat this weekend about discernment, based on Cynthia Bourgeau's teachings on discernment. And she has this teaching she calls the four voices. And very often, two of the voices are lined up against a third voice, and you have to wait for this fourth voice, the voice of the heart, to emerge, which happens in surprising ways and somehow reconciles the others, but in a way that you could never have predicted or never have forced. And that third voice, that voice of the heart, that voice of the deeper reality, doesn't come forth unless you're able to sit in the contradiction, to stay with the apparent opposites of the paradox. When we had the amazing joy of being with John Philip Newell this last weekend, I got to sit right here. I've rewatched bits of my conversation with him several times. What did he say? Okay, all right, that's what he said. Okay, I need to hear it in a new way. It was such a privilege just to kind of get to pepper him with my questions for an hour. But the question that really struck me for this season, for this time that we're walking into now, is I asked him about Jesus. I said, what? And I still don't know where he's at on Jesus, to be honest. But I asked him, and I said, how does, we know that there's blessedness, that's his thing, right? Get rid of the original sin. It's our original being made in the image of God, right, is what the Celtic tradition would lift up. And we know that we also come into the world with original wounding and brokenness and all that. We have to hold both of these things. I said, but how does Jesus help us to move towards, from this original wounding towards this original blessedness as we're sitting in the contradiction of both of these things? And he said, well, Jesus didn't say, I'm going to pick up my cross so you don't have to. He said, pick up your cross and follow me. Right? I'm going to show you the way. I can't walk your way for you, right? I can't sit in the paradox for you, but I can show you the way. And so the beauty of Lent is that we take this time to sit in these apparent contradictions, right? To sit in our own failings in the way that the world is failing us and God's dream. To sit in the reality of death as we await for the emergence of new life. And as John Philip Newell said, then the salvation, the healing ointment actually becomes all of our work when we find the abundant life that God's promised us. I'm pretty convinced that's where this is going. And I'm kind of putting all of my eggs in that basket this Lent, right? That God wants life. Jesus said he came to give us life and life abundant, right? And there's something about not just skipping over the death part. There's something about picking up our cross, whatever that looks like. There's something about sitting in the paradox that is a necessary ingredient to that life that Jesus calls abundant. So I'm going to leave you with some words from a dear, dear poet who reminds us that Ash Wednesday, the dust that we are made of, the dust of this earth, the carbon that our bodies are made of, is stardust originally. I'm not an astrophysicist. I don't know how that works, but I believe him. And that we're all a part of this cycle of death and new life. Jan Richardson from Ash Wednesday, Blessing the Dust. So let us be marked not for sorrow, and let us be marked not for shame. Let us be marked not for false humility or for thinking we are less than we are, but for claiming what God can do within the dust, within the dirt, within the stuff of which the world is made, and the stars that blaze in our bones, and the galaxies that spiral inside the smudge we bear.